Summer routines live or die by how easy they are, and honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 177, recording on Tuesday afternoon, June 16th. Thank you guys for being here. If you don't know me, I'm Alec Lewis. I cover the Vikings for The Athletic. We've got this show running 2 times a week, every single week, including the off season. And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a ton. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or iHeart, you can rate, review, and give us 5 stars, and we are grateful and will be grateful for that as well. On this episode, going to take you guys questions, and it was ran the gamut from the new front office hires that Nolan Teasley, the new GM, has made, to J.J. McCarthy's health in 2025, to where the quarterback competition is, to the position battles that I'm looking forward to watching. Brendan Sorsby conversation mixed in. So should be a fun episode, and appreciate all of you who passed along your questions on social media at Alec_Lewis, at Alec Lewis Show. This show is presented by First Resource Bank. We'll talk a little bit more about those guys in a bit. And then show's also sponsored by Pro MN Athletics, a youth development shop in football that is lifting the tide for youth football in Minnesota. And then Unreal, the clothing brand that I'm rocking on the lower half right now. So let's get right into questions. Why not hop directly in? Because it's what we love doing. So one user asked on social media everything we should know about Ryan Pace and Azam Kapadia and their hires. I will also mix in some thoughts and conversation on the 2 hires that really surfaced late last week on Friday evening, while I may or may not have been on a terrace at a golf course at a wedding. But Trent Kirshner and Andrew Healy, who I've done some work on in recent days. So we'll begin with Andrew Healy because he is, it's pretty clear. Andrew Healy is going to be kind of the primary right-hand type of guy for Nolan Teasley within the front office, and then Trent Kirshner's right there. And Andrew Healy he's a fascinating background, so fascinating that I might indeed have a story at The Athletic on that background later this week. But he was an economics, he's a Yale grad, MIT grad, MBA, economics professor at Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles, in Playa Vista, which is arguably one of the most beautiful campuses in the country. And then started writing for Football Outsiders, which was really on the forefront of a lot of the data analysis within football that has proliferated more and more over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years. In 2016, the Cleveland Browns were part of being on the forefront of a lot of this analysis. They hired Paul DePodesta, who was played by Jonah Hill in Moneyball, and they started to build out what is widely regarded as one of the most, deep and invested in analytics departments within the NFL. And one of their first hires was Andrew Healy, who in the public space, he had I guess you'd call it a projection system called Cubase that really took into account a lot of different layers of quarterback production in college, of quarterback opponent, I would say, strength in college, and tried to predict with probability the likelihood that some of these quarterbacks coming out of college would succeed or fail. So he was hired in 2016 by the Cleveland Browns, and then over the course of the last decade has seen every iteration of that front office, and that's different GMs, that's different head coaches, that's different processes. They've built out a lot of I would say tools, to be very general, to help that personnel department make decisions. And Andrew Berry and their current general manager, they've obviously taken a lot of flack over the last 6 years for decisions made and lack of success at times. But I think the more you look into how that front office has operated, the more people internally have respect for just the ability to bridge a bunch of realms of thought to just cover for one another and make the best decision. I think like that often is what gets most lost in the perception of analytics people in sports, is that like they are just in a room all by themselves coming up with ways to find the right answer and don't care for other realms of thought. And that couldn't be further from the truth with Andrew Healy. Like he is a very curious, inquisitive guy who has a lot had and still has a lot of respect from people in that Cleveland building for just wanting to really provide the scouts and the evaluators and decision makers with as much information to cover any potential blind spot that might have existed. So there's no question that Nolan Teasley prioritized bringing in a guy like him. And there's no doubt that the conversations that Nolan Teasley will be able to have with Andrew Healy and that other executives and scouts in this Vikings building will be able to have with them should allow for growth and potential resources to make the best decisions possible. It doesn't mean every decision is going to be great. Doesn't mean every decision is an analytics decision or a scout's decision. I think like you talk to really smart people within the league that they will tell you that the best way to use scouting and evaluation and the best way to use data analysis and research and analytics is when they're married together and viewed alongside one another. And that might be pie in the sky thinking. That might be like a very kumbaya way of describing it. But I genuinely think it's like everything in any business. Like I think about it with my own business and sports journalism. Like there's no question the data should guide what people are interested in, but you also need the curiosity and the feel of the editors and the writers and whomever to, you know, covet and go after stories that fit a certain like, realm of curiosity. So that's Andrew Healy. Trent Kirshner is he fits and really provides and brings a phenomenal level of experience and expertise on the scouting side. And so when and Trent Kirshner is a Minnesota native, believe Fulda, Minnesota, grew up a Vikings fan, has always, I think, had his eye on being able to come back and bring this organization and this team to a place that he never got to see it get to growing up. And he, again, is your prototypical, like, just very serious evaluator. And Trick Kirshner has had his hand in every, aspect of the organization in Seattle, whether it's pro scouting, whether it's college scouting, whether it's evaluation of other leagues. I mean, when Nolan Teasley said in his press conference that he wanted to be guided by evaluation, anchored by data, well, now you have, in many ways, those two pillars filled by extreme experts in their field on the evaluation side with Trent Kirshner and on the data side with Andrew Healy. And so how that comes together, how, those two guys and their areas of expertise flow to the rest of the staff is something that you guys absolutely know that I will be dialed into over the course of the next year and beyond. As far as Ryan Pace and Azam Kapadia, so Ryan Pace is a former GM for the Chicago Bears. Obviously, took two big quarterback swings with Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields. And so that will, I would say, probably cloud or color the way that so many will view both him and what he represents. But I think, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and this is probably the right place to say it. Like, I always think it's so interesting when evaluators or GMs who are eventually fired and let go, and this is like Ryan Grigson probably falls within this conversation too, like are just absolutely ridiculed and pigeonholed as incapable or terrible, or that they don't know anything about football and everything they think is wrong. Like I always find that such an interesting kind of perception or part of like how the narrative works. And that's not to say that evaluators, like there aren't bad evaluators, that evaluators can't miss, but to then, just because they have, I think that's part of evaluation. Like, just like on the data side, there are probabilities of things working out and not. Like it isn't talked about in this way, but when you're evaluating players and going through the depth of understanding and history in terms of like players you've evaluated in the past, doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. These are human beings who, when they enter a building in a new environment, they're going to change. There's the development process within drafting players specifically. There's a lot of information that has to be discerned from the top decision makers. So I just think it's a little bit, I'd say lacks nuance to view a Ryan Pace or a Ryan Grigson, and they're two very different, executives. But I think the conversation writ large encompasses both of those guys. I think it's just it lacks nuance viewing it that aggressively. And it's not, you guys can want, believe and think, whatever you want to. But I think it's not often as simple as I think, people make it out to be in terms of failed in one place or fired in one place, so terrible evaluator. And like I said this on the podcast before, like people ask me what do I think or what I've thought the biggest misconception of the Vikings organization has been since I started covering the team. And one of the answers that I've given is just like that everything that's been bad over the last 4 years is Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and his like lack of understanding from a football perspective. So it's a little bit of a tangent, but Ryan Pace, there were also very productive draft picks in Chicago. And he also will provide Nolan Teasley with a very deep understanding of every aspect of being in the GM role, whether it's staff communication, whether it's how to structure meetings, whether it's working with coaching staff, whether it's hiring, whether it's working with the media, whether it's agent negotiations and conversations, like just to have another person who has sat in that very seat, who understands, I think, the complexities and the dynamics of it, is potentially really valuable. And then Azam Kapadia is a pretty fascinating arc and rise. I mean, this dude went to the University of Virginia, from my understanding, has worked with or in college did work with Virginia's football team, was hired as an intern with the Seahawks in 2023, and then very quickly began to impress folks within that organization. I talked to someone who is still there about Azam Kapadia, and the praise was very, very high. He will step in as an assistant, pro scouting director with the team, and it just kind of speaks to a fresh perspective, new eyes, ability to marry and bridge different realms of thought and how to look at players. So I see it completely as a positive that Nolan Teasley has brought these guys in. And I wouldn't just I would not just say that to say it. I think for me, in talking to a lot of people around the league about who Nolan Teasley has hired and the way they've gone about it, it's been impressive to people. It stood out to people. Now, for it will only go so far as the results end up showing, especially here where there have been as many iterations of there have been, but it's important that I pass that along, I think. Next question comes from Skoldoc. Now that we know the Vikings would like to transition to more of a wide zone run scheme, do you have any knowledge on how KOC will marry his pass game to this new run scheme. So I wouldn't necessarily say, Skoldock, that it's a new run scheme. I'd say the Vikings have run a lot of outside zone. I think I looked this up earlier or late last week. The Vikings were like top maybe 15 in terms of percentage of outside zone runs in 2025. I'd say if there's anything different with it, it is just the amount of the fact that it is like the main identity priority and informs how they practice every single day, and then how they will be able to adjust and kind of layer off the way that they are practicing and building this specific iteration of what they want to do with the wide zone is different. As far as how Kevin O'Connell will marry up the pass game to the run game, I think you're going to still see a lot of the naked keeper bootleg stuff that we've seen a lot over the last 4 years. I think you're certainly going to see some pocket movement and ability to kind of set the pocket in different ways that perhaps you haven't seen maybe a ton, but we've definitely seen it over the last 4 years. I think the deep play action stuff and being able to then rip passes over the second level of the defense, which has been a staple of the system, you're going to continue to see. And I guess the best way to answer the question, Skoldocs, I think so much of why the Vikings targeted Frank Smith, the assistant head coach and former OC in Miami, as the assistant head coach, and why Kevin O'Connell, that was an important hire for him, is because his understanding conceptually of the run game and the pass game at a very intricate level, and specifically, the run game that the Vikings wanted to incorporate and the pass game that Mike McDaniel incorporated, and that, Frank Smith will obviously absorb with Kevin O'Connell and has absorbed in recent months. I think so much of his role will be being able to really be like the connector of those two worlds in the run and the pass, and like to where those two worlds aren't, maybe as siloed as they used to be, and that there is a very much a connectivity in terms of how those areas are taught, how they are game planned for, how they are adjusted on the fly, and all of that. So hopefully that answers the question. Next one comes from username on Twitter at JJetta's agent. I don't believe this is actually his agent, because I am familiar with who his agent actually is. The question: outside of the quarterback, what battles are you looking forward to most watching in training camp? Three little areas came to mind for me, and I might be missing something obvious, but I'd say tight end 3 is of interest to me. The defensive tackle depth is, and how kind of the depth chart ends up looking at that position. That's one. And then just the safety configurations in terms of, like, will Jacoby Thomas get some first team snaps in training camp? How much is Jay Ward playing on the back end versus near the line of scrimmage? Same with Josh Metellus. Like, how much is Theo Jackson mixing in? Those three areas. The tight end group is like Gavin Bartholomew, Ben Urasek, who played more last year, Bryson Nesbitt, the undrafted player from 2 years ago from North Carolina. Can he mix in? I mean, I'll get to this in a little bit, but like, I wouldn't be absolutely, I would say, just, it wouldn't frustrate me. I would totally understand if the Vikings, were sifting. I haven't heard this at all, so this shouldn't get aggregated. But I would say, like, just given the fact that the Vikings will probably prefer to use multiple tight ends in 2026, and because TJ Hawkins and Josh Oliver have navigated injuries in past years, to have someone with more experience potentially in that spot, even though they did add Max Bredesen in the draft, like, I wouldn't push back on adding something at low level as depth at tight end. So, like, again, haven't heard this, not something I would aggregate, but like, if come training camp in the preseason and someone's cut and the Vikings were to, target someone in that spot, like, I'm not going to be surprised by it at all. And I think I'd probably be in support of it. So hopefully that answers that one. I want to shout out the sponsors a little bit. So our presenting sponsor, First Resource Bank. If you don't know about it, you should. It's a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area, run by really good people. Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, and Charlie Anderson. These guys have come together over the years to build a bank that fits right alongside the Minneapolis community. They've got branches all over the place. They work a lot with local businesses, and their online banking platform is phenomenal. It's the one that I've used since I moved up here to Minneapolis, and they love the Vikings. You walk into one of the branches, and I guarantee you there will be someone in there who will be talking your ear off in a phenomenally good way about the Kyler Murray, JJ McCarthy competition. But they go to every game. They're really pillars within this community, so it's been awesome to get to partner with them on this show. Pro MN Athletics is another one of our sponsors, and just cannot say enough about what those guys, three guys over there, Kurt, Graham, and Tanner, are doing to lift the tide of youth football development in Minnesota. Tanner is Tanner Morgan, who played quarterback at the University of Minnesota and was even kind of in the Vikings building a little bit, working with some of their offense a couple of years ago. So, he's put together some 7-on-7 leagues in the summer. They've got a winter academy. Tanner specifically is working with a ton of youth football quarterbacks that, who are potential Division I guys in 2028 and 2029. So I'd say if you have a son who plays football and they want to play in middle school and high school, whether it's quarterback, receiver, offensive line, and you want them to work with guys who have played in college, who really understand the position and positions and really what it looks like to go on that path through middle school, high school, and college, cannot recommend Pro MN enough. So their information is in the description. And then Unreal, the clothing brand based out of St. Paul. We started with those guys before last football season. They do throughout the fall limited edition Vikings hoodie drops that are some of the coolest Vikings apparel that you're probably going to be able to find. They sell out almost immediately. And then throughout the year, they've got some classic athleisure that is really comfortable, that makes you look, or at least makes me look much better probably than I should. Can't thank them enough for their support, but awesome partners. Have had a blast getting to build this show with those folks alongside us. And with that, let's get back to the podcast. All right, next question comes from Nick Howard at BD97. What do you make of ESPN making a pitch for the Vikings to use the number 27 pick on Brennan Sorsby in the supplemental draft? Woo! That is it's a mouthful. It's interesting. I did not see that ESPN suggested that. I would be curious who over there did that. Maybe it was Mike Tenenbaum. I feel like I saw something float across my timeline. I mean, I'll give a couple things on Brennan Sorsby in the supplemental draft. I mean, first and foremost, I think he has to withdraw the lawsuit, and then the NFL has to deem that he's eligible for the supplemental draft. So it's a little bit down the road from where things are right now. And potentially if it gets there, then it opens up Pandora's box in terms of a bunch of other questions. I will just start with the tape that I've watched of Brennan Sorsby and a couple people throughout the league, not with the Vikings, who I've talked about him with. I actually spent last night, watched the Iowa State tape, the Arizona tape, and then one more. It might have been BYU. So 180 plays of Brennan Sorsby. And how I described him, I'll actually give you guys. I sent this to a scout because it was my perspective, and they were just curious, what do you think? So I said he's athletic as heck, good size, big arm angles, definitely creative. Showed some deep ball accuracy, not always consistent. Not a ton of pro-style concepts, not a crazy amount of anticipation or throwing over to the middle, but the talent is obvious. So that was kind of my take watching it. There are some people within the league who I know really, really, think highly of him as a physical talent. There's no doubt about that. Otherwise, that's Texas Tech paid him for a reason. But I remember even going back to last fall, talking to some people in the league who, while I was asking them about all the quarterbacks, your Carson Becks and your Nussmeyers and all those guys, people mentioned Sorsby at that time. This was long before he kind of became what is now known as, or became known the way he is now. So I'd say for the Vikings specifically, I mean, the idea of bringing in another quarterback, it's lofty certainly, and I'd say the idea of bringing in another guy who is raw and untapped, who would require time, and then who you'd have to check a bunch of boxes from an off-field standpoint. I mean, that would just be a lot of it would just be a lot to inject in what the Vikings organization already has at that position and just, constructed from a cultural standpoint is what I would say. But there's no doubt that any team that doesn't explore it and research the possibilities and what, the dynamic of who Brendan Sorsby is, what he's done, what he's where he is mentally, all of those layers must be sifted through by all teams. And so, I'd say number 27 in a first round supplemental pick is very lofty based upon just the conversations I've had. I mean, maybe a team, takes the shot in the second round or third round if that were to happen, but first round seems quite rich, certainly. Next question came from Ryan Erickson. How close do you anticipate the tight end 3 battle being? I mean, I definitely, that's why I mentioned at the beginning of the competition I'm looking forward to. I'd say, if the Vikings don't make an external addition and it is just your Gavin Bartholomew, Ben Urasek, and Bryson Nesbitt competing, it should be quite close. If there's an external addition in some form or fashion, then perhaps it's not as close, and those guys you try to slide to the practice squad or something. But that's kind of how I feel about that. Next one comes from Joan Satra. Why are there no observations or takes on Wentz? How about trade JJ and have Wentz be quarterback too? I mean, as far as Carson Wentz, he just hasn't gotten that many reps, or he didn't get many reps in the workouts that we saw. And then when he did, I mean, I've said this on the podcast, but Carson Wentz ran the offense like you'd expect him to. Now, having been in it for a year, his size definitely stands out above the other quarterbacks. I mean, both height and just in terms of thickness of just watching them. The arm strength is obviously there. I think, seeing the field when the bullets are flying, that's where questions begin. And then the durability in the long haul, that's another question with Carson. But, I think any team that has him as their backup quarterback, you feel pretty solid about it. As far as trading JJ, I mean, that's where you go down the road of, A, what's going to be the result of this competition? B, if Kyler does win the job, how does JJ feel about that? And then C, what would the trade opportunities even be for JJ McCarthy if other teams end up knowing that you're not gonna, he's not your primary quarterback option. I also think the idea that a guy can continue to improve even if he's not starting in 2026 at the beginning of 2026. I think it would be foolish to think that growth is then just capped for someone of JJ McCarthy's age. So a lot of ramble there, but that's kind of how I'd answer that one. Trevor Laxon asked, did JJ McCarthy break his hand last year in week 1? Yes or no? I don't know if someone reported that. I would say I haven't been told that happened. I do think there was a lot of injury stuff throughout the year. Obviously the stuff that everybody knows of the ankle and the hand towards the end and the concussion symptoms after the Packers game. But, there was definitely stuff throughout the year that he navigated, but just like with every player in the NFL, you don't always hear of what they're going through at all times, nor does the team or the player feel the need to publicly express all of that. So I think to try to pin a certain injury at a certain time to then, in your mind, make you feel better about where a player was or can be. I think that you're going down a pretty slippery slope there. I would say the abundance of injuries, it also makes it really hard, and it makes on the public side, it makes it really hard to make a really good evaluation of what JJ was and is and can be. I think for internally with the team, like that was also another dynamic, and that is a data point in itself. The fact that there hasn't been a clean enough sample to make a really full evaluation in 2 seasons. So hopefully that answers the question. But as far as breaking the hand in week 1, that is not something that I've heard. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it didn't happen if someone else very trusted and respected reported that. But that's just kind of where I'm at with the information that I have. Next question, John Henry. Has there been any talk about J.J. McCarthy's weight/frame? Did he look bigger at OTAs and minicamp? I don't know if he looked bigger. I thought he looked good. Like I thought, from the height, weight perspective, he didn't look thin. He didn't look overly thick to me. He looked, like the 6 foot, every bit of 6'2", 215, 220 or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, I thought he looked good. I've said it on the podcast now many times. Like I thought the mechanics looked smooth. There were spray misses from time to time. The downfield accuracy, I would say, or just the abundance of downfield throws, didn't see as many as I wanted to be able to evaluate that part of it, but that's okay. Like that's not a referendum on the team or him or anything. So yeah, I thought physically J.J. McCarthy looked really good. No doubt about that. Next question came from Wolverine was the Twitter username. Let's see here. Wolverine. Gotta find this. Wolverine Thump. Can we expect Max Bredesen to take the CJ Ham third down pass defender in the backfield, or do you think the coaches will go with the vet instead? No, I definitely think Max Bredesen is smart enough and astute enough to learn the playbook and to be able to acclimate to that third down pass protection role. That was a huge one, like very low key at the beginning of 2024. Kevin O'Connell had an idea that was a really good idea to position the fullback in kind of the backfield to pass protect, because that player obviously in CJ Ham had more girth and the mental acumen to be able to understand all of the pass protection kind of dynamics that are necessary to understand to pass protect effectively. So, I think Max Bredesen is definitely capable of filling that role, and I think that's part of the reason that the Vikings were willing to even draft him in the spot that they were. Now, I think his responsibilities are going to range. I think he can line up in line next to the tight ends. I think he can go in motion from the slot. I think, you'll see a lot of different types of usages to work with him both in the run and the pass. Let's see here. Question that I enjoyed from Harry. What's your favorite golf course currently? I would say if you're talking about me playing here locally in Minneapolis area, in a public course, I would say White Eagle. And I think it's kind of near the Wisconsin border, but that one I've really enjoyed playing that one in some recent years. But I mean, there's so many good public courses here, and I think like that's one of the more underrated aspects of moving here and realizing how much people love golf and what that entails. So I don't take for granted the opportunity to be able to play here locally, and some pretty bad swings out there if you were to see me. MG Walleye asks, provide us an example of a personnel set or a scheme shift that you could see being deployed by Kevin O'Connell that would cater to Kyler's skill set versus planting him in the pocket and forcing him to read pure progression. I would say there are a bunch of possibilities. I think, playing out of the pistol is, and even more than the Vikings have in past years, that would be one way to get the best out of Kyler's strengths from a drop back perspective, but also what the Vikings want to do in the run game. So that's one area that comes to mind. That's pretty general and basic. I'd say the dash concept, which is essentially where the quarterback drops back straight and then sets the pocket, but then kind of moves to the outside with a little bit of a to throw the football with a little bit of a convoy of blockers in front of him to clear sight lines, to get the quarterback on the move a little bit beyond just the regular naked boot type of concept. Like, that's an area where I'd expect to see even more of those. And then in the run game, I mean, you've seen Miami do a lot of what is widely regarded and known with a lot of coaches in the league as like the spinner type of handoff possibility, where it's, fake shotgun read option type of play, zone read type of play, and then you're flipping the ball behind you to a player who's coming in motion. Like, I think there's ways to incorporate, and Green Bay's done a lot of that with Jordan Love out of the shotgun and out of the pistol with some of their run game stuff. So I think that's another incorporation that you could see. So that's 3. Those are all pretty basic in general and different, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of a perspective of what is possible. And I think to not see a lot of that in minicamp and in spring workouts makes a lot of sense for a couple of reasons. One, why showcase that to the media on a daily basis to then have us talking about it? And then B, the ability to use those practices as a opportunity to see what Kyler is capable of with the complexity of the offense and in the pure progression world. Like, why not use the less pressure induced practice time to try to gather or garner a feel for some of that stuff? So that's what I'd say. That'll probably do it for episode 177 of the Alec Lewis Show. If there's anything I didn't get to, please toss it at me in the comment section or on social media at Alec_Lewis, at Alec Lewis Show. You can find us on Instagram too, where we're posting constantly over there, and sometimes do some pop-up Q&As over there. Show's presented by First Resource Bank. It's sponsored by ProMN. It's sponsored by Unreal. Hope you guys have a phenomenal week. Enjoy some of the World Cup if you're watching, the U.S. Open at Shinnecock if you're watching, and that'll do it. Talk to you guys very, very soon.